The serious consequences of this extraordinary summer can be seen and felt across much of the UK, especially England and Wales. We certainly need a lot of rain to relieve the situation. How much rain do we need? And are we likely to get it anytime soon? Welcome to the Met Office Deep Dive. Thank you for joining me this week. We do these regularly every Tuesday. They are in-depth looks at the weather across the UK. And if you enjoy 20 to 30 minute weather forecasts that look at the more technical aspects of meteorology sometimes and try to explain the weather that has just been and the weather that is to come, please do give us a follow if you're not already. Spread the word if you know other people who might like these. Ask us a question. We like to answer them in the Weather Studio Live, which is another video that we do regularly on a Friday lunchtime. But enough on that. Let's get stuck in. And before I talk about the rain, let's talk about the heat, because we've just gone through yet another remarkable heat wave. And in fact, I see this summer as being bookended by two reasonably extreme heat waves, both of which saw 38 Celsius recorded or exceeded. And that marked, for the June heat wave, the earliest 38 Celsius on record by 3 weeks. And for the August heat wave, just last week, the latest 38 Celsius recorded by a matter of 3 days. So 38 Celsius, we might have gotten used to in this summer, temperatures into the mid-30s and beyond. But it's worth emphasising how unusual these kinds of temperatures are. Of course, in the 1980s, 35 Celsius wasn't recorded once. We've recorded it lots of times this summer. 38 Celsius, these two extreme heat waves that bookended the summer, with several heat waves in between, of course, of a slightly less severe and less widespread nature. But I thought it might be interesting to compare the two heat waves, because in many ways they were very similar, both in terms of their maximum temperatures and the main mechanism behind the heating, but also they were quite different in when it comes to humidity, especially in terms of the impacts and the forecasting challenges as well. Let's start off by looking at the heat wave that peaked on the 26th of June 2026. Here's the synoptic map, and I know whenever we show these black and white synoptic charts, people say they can't see them very clearly, but I don't draw them. It's the best I can do right now, I'm afraid. I'll try and make it easy by pointing out where the UK is. Here we are in the middle, and then the solid black lines here with the spiky things on them, those are weather fronts and so on. There's a big H here over Denmark. So high pressure was to the east of the UK, as you'd often expect when you get an extreme heat wave in the UK. You typically have high pressure at the surface close by, especially to the east, and then an upper high as well, which, well, you can just about imagine extends right the way up into Scandinavia as this high pressure builds northwards. And the high pressure was drifting eastwards with these troughs coming into parts of the southwest and Wales. So the 26th of June, although that's the day that 38.0 Celsius was recorded in Lingwood, Norfolk, it was cooler than the day or the preceding days across western parts of the country. A change was on the way. But on this particular June heatwave, the primary mechanism for heating the air and for those extraordinary high temperatures was sinking air, as is normally the case for heatwaves in the UK. Under high pressure at the surface and high pressure higher above, the air was becoming compressed, just like when you pump up your bicycles. That compression led to higher temperatures wherever that air was sourced from. More on that in a moment. A very similar pressure chart for 13th of August, which is the peak of last week's heat wave. High pressure again to the east, a big upper high also sitting just to the east of the UK. So we've again got that main heating mechanism. Air sourced from elsewhere was sinking and being compressed under high pressure. That's the primary cause for the higher temperatures, not the only cause, because what also helped under sinking air was that there was very little cloud development. So we had strong sunshine, both in June and in August. And that's, if you like, was the icing on top of the cake, because that added additional heat, the solar insolation. But of course, in that situation, June had the edge because the sun was so much stronger in June, close to midsummer, about as strong as it gets, less strong mid-August, but a few other differences important to take into account for these two heat waves. And one is where the air was being sourced from. And this is really quite stark, the differences between the two situations. And again, I'm sorry for the quality of these charts, it's the best I could find in a reasonably short space of time earlier in the day. But the UK is here, and this chart on the left shows where the air came from for the peak of the heat in June, and the air on that day at lower levels is shaded in darker blue, and you can trace the lines back to discover that the air on that hottest day back in June came from Iberia, sort of just across Portugal, perhaps parts of the Atlantic or the Bay of Biscay. So the air was sourced from lower latitudes, and as a result it had pretty high potential. It already started off warm, and then it was drawn into the high pressure, compressed. That added a lot of the heating and ended up being heated by the sun over the UK. So, not necessarily heated by the sun directly, I'll talk more about that in a second. So, lots of potential where the air came from in June. The air in August last week came from a very different location. The darker blues you can see, a day or two before it came from northern France and the Low Countries, but before that it came all the way back from Iceland, and in fact some of these lines go all the way to the Arctic Circle. So the air was sourced from cooler and less humid locations. It had lower potential compared with June. So if you're just taking the starting potential of the air, June, much higher potential. However, also higher humidities. And the difference in humidities was very large. You might have noticed that, experiencing both heat waves yourselves. And another thing that caused the June heat wave to be more humid, of course, was that the first half of June was especially wet. We had above average rainfall. It's easy to forget now, but the first 2 weeks of June were wet across large parts of the UK. We had lots of weather systems going through, some heavy rain at times. Then, at the start of the week in question, the heat peaked on Friday. Remember, at the start of that week, there was this large area of thunderstorms, thundery rain that crossed the south of the UK. So actually the ground was moist, and that added to the humidity, but also took away from the resultant temperatures. So I mentioned just a minute ago, incorrectly of course, that the sun heated the air. It doesn't heat the air, it heats the ground, and the ground then heats the air. That's what happens. Strong sunshine heats the ground then heats the air. Now, if the ground is wet, a lot of that solar energy is going to evaporate the moisture in the soils before it then goes on to warm up the ground, and then that heats the air. So if you've got this high potential air coming from the south, getting compressed under high pressure, strong sun, but then a lot of the energy is going to evaporate the water on the ground that's just fallen in recent days and weeks, then the potential's not quite reached. And the computer models, this is interesting, the computer models that week, you may remember this, were forecasting temperatures of 40, 41, 42 Celsius as the maximum temperatures that week. Now, our experts in the operations centre here at the Met Office didn't expect temperatures to reach those kinds of values because these computer models have been known to overestimate how dry the soils are. And so they were assuming that the soil was relatively dry. They weren't factoring in those earlier thunderstorms. And as a result, with that potential air mass and the strong sun and so on, the models were thinking temperatures are going to go up to 40, 41, 42 Celsius. And the air temperature potentially would have done if so much of that heat from the sun wasn't lost through evaporating the moisture. So the chiefs upstairs fully expected the models to be overestimating things, and the most likely maximum temperature that week in our forecasts was 39 Celsius. Not in the apps, of course, that's automated data. A lot of people saw 40, 41 Celsius in various weather apps, but the official forecast that we were giving in our presented videos and other locations was 39 Celsius as most likely high. Of course, it ended up being 38.0 Celsius, so even lower than the models were suggesting. Then we got to last week, and the models weren't overestimating how dry the soils were because, of course, they're about as dry as they can get. So we had more confidence that the models were correct when they were suggesting maximum temperatures last week of a smidge under 38 Celsius. In fact, in the days preceding the 13th of August, the chiefs and deputy chiefs realised that the models were actually underdoing temperatures each day by about half a degree, so they upped them and said the most likely temperature on Thursday the 13th would be 38 Celsius, and that temperature was realised. 38.1 Celsius at Kew Gardens, for example, 38.0 for Pershore in the Midlands. So, yeah, two similar situations: high pressure, sinking air, compression, strong sun. But the potential in June was far greater because of the source of the air, and at the same time, the humidities were greater in June. There was more moisture at the surface and in the air, of course, as well, which we all felt. That meant that we ended up with very similar maximum temperatures for both situations. But we also ended up with very different impacts. Now, with higher humidities in June, it was much more oppressive, much more difficult for we humans to deal with, for us to cool down, for our homes to cool down, and for our bodies to get some relief. It wasn't just very humid by day, it was hotter by night compared with the August heatwave. The temperatures weren't dropping away so much. And as a result, we ended up with a red extreme heat warning and really significant health impacts, which are estimated to have caused in excess of 2,000 excess deaths in that June heatwave. So tragically, health impacts were serious back in June because of that humidity, because of the overnight temperatures and the very high daytime temperatures. Conversely, it was a little more challenging for meteorologists to assess the kinds of impacts they were expecting last week because of such lower humidities. Now, to compare the two, in June, the humidities, or the dew points, were typically in the low 20s in places. That's really quite high for a dew point temperature. Last week, during the peak of the heat, dew points were 8 to 10 Celsius, which is more similar to the July 2022 heatwave when 40 Celsius was recorded. So a dry heat. Less impactful on health compared with the June heatwave. So less certain how widespread health impacts were going to be last week, and less long-lived, with a bit more relief by night. So those are the positive things. However, we saw the serious consequences of wildfires developing because, of course, the state of the ground across many parts of England and Wales, and this dry heat, this surge in temperatures, which led to devastating scenes in many parts of the UK, especially through the Midlands. 19 homes sadly destroyed, and of course that then led to a ban on disposable wildfires. So two extreme heat waves, differing primarily in the source of the air, the soil conditions, and the resultant humidities and impacts. Not just that, but they differed in terms of how widespread the heat was. This graphic, you might be able to see it, but I'll guide you through it. It shows the percentage of the observing network reaching 36 Celsius or higher since 1931. And basically it shows how widespread those temperatures have been for various heat waves. Number one, unsurprisingly, the 19th of June 2022, when almost a third of the observing network across the UK recorded 36 Celsius or higher. Number two, significantly lower than that extraordinary day back 4 years ago. Number two, close to 18%, the day before we hit 40 Celsius, 18th of June 2022. But number three was last week, 13th of August 2026. The third highest percentage of the observing network reached 36 Celsius or higher, and that was just a smidge over 15% of the observing network reached 36 Celsius or higher. And then in fourth place, you got 25th of July 2019. That's when the UK temperature record was beaten before we got to 40 Celsius. And then in fifth place, you've got 26th of June 2026. And we've talked a lot about the occurrences this year of different temperature thresholds. We've covered it in detail, so I'm not going to go through it again, but safe to say that for virtually every temperature threshold from 28 Celsius up to and including 37 Celsius, 2026 is number one, joint first for 38 Celsius or above, joint first with 2022, of course. 2 days, and only the second year that 38 Celsius has been recorded twice. So all these temperature thresholds have been exceeded this year, and it's been such an extraordinary summer for the amount of days of 30 Celsius, 32, and so on. This graphic shows how it compares with previous years. There are some standout years, and I appreciate, again, it's a graphic that might take some getting used to, and you might need to squint a bit, but I'll get you through it. This is the number of days different temperature thresholds have been reached each year since 1931. The years going from 1931 on the left all the way up to 2026 on the right. That's 2026, and there are 3 colours involved here. The white is the 30 Celsius. This colour, whatever it is, I'm colourblind, I don't know what it is, red, orange, browny kind of colour, I don't know. The middle colour is 32 Celsius or above, and then this blue kind of colour, or maybe it's purple, I don't know, but you tell me. It's on the bottom, that's 35 Celsius. And for those 3 temperature thresholds, they exceed every other year since 1931, and then combined they exceed every other year. A couple of standout years, obviously 1976, 1975 as well, out here in the middle. 1995 is the big one. A lot of those temperature thresholds were previously reached in terms of how frequent they were in their records in 1995, but we've had this upward trend, albeit sporadic, in the last few years. So quite a chunk of recent years have been reasonably high for all these temperature thresholds. Another notable one there, 2018, you may remember that one, long, hot summer. So those records have already been broken. A number of times certain thresholds have been exceeded for this summer. But what we don't know yet is whether it's going to be the warmest summer on record. We can have a good guess, and we can talk about how likely it is, and that's what this table of numbers shows us, and there's a lot of numbers to get your head around here, so I'll just pick out key ones. We've got the area down the left-hand side, UK, England, Wales, Scotland, etc. And then we've got the actual mean temperature. That's the first column of numbers. Now, mean temperature, that means the average of the overnight minimum and the daytime maximum. And it's currently showing for the UK 16.65. That's up to and including yesterday, 17th of August. How does that compare with the warmest summer on record? Well, that currently stands as last year, which was 16.12. So currently running at above that, quite significantly above. So if we stopped here, obviously it would be number 1 warmest summer on record for mean temperature, but we're not going to stop here. It is going to get cooler over the next few days. Will that prevent it from being the warmest summer on record? Well, this number in the far right corner tells you how much warmer or cooler the rest of August would need to be compared with summer overall to be the warmest summer on record. And it's saying the anomaly to equal the record is minus 1.95. In other words, if the anomaly for the rest of August compared with summer is minus 1.95, it will equal last year's warmest summer on record. If it's slightly warmer than that, if it's an anomaly of minus 1.9, minus 1, a degree 0.9 below average for the next couple of weeks, it will be the warmest summer on record. So we mentioned this last week, it's likely to be the warmest summer on record for mean temperature in the UK, unless it ends up being 2 degrees below average for the next couple of weeks. That's the UK. A couple of other things to point out. All of these regions across the UK are number 1, except Northern Ireland, which is currently running at 2nd warmest on record, despite it being quite wet at times this summer. And Scotland, you might be surprised to hear, nowhere near as exceptional as England and Wales, but still running at 7th warmest summer on record. Again, could change significantly in the next couple of weeks. It's just showing where things currently stand. Now, maximum temperatures, so I talked about mean temperature there, and that's interesting because it's maximum combined with minimum. But if you just take maximum temperatures, again, the same sort of table here, UK at the top row, and it's showing the current actual maximum temperature averaged across the UK is 21.54 Celsius. The record stands at 1976. So this is a long-standing record, maximum temperature for summer in the UK. And even though 1976 is 6th in the list of warmest summers when you take into account nighttime temperatures as well as daytime temperatures, because we've had a lot of summers in recent years that have had warm nights as well as warm days, the maximum temperature hasn't been broken yet. As things stand, this summer's on course to beat that. It would need an anomaly of minus 1.29 Celsius. In other words, if it's a degree or a little bit above, below normal, doesn't make sense, does it? If it's just a bit more than a degree below normal for the rest of summer, it will beat 1976. Again, no guarantees. This is just where things currently stand. We've still got a couple of weeks left to go. But what's even more remarkable is when you look at some of these bigger numbers, the anomalies you need to beat the record, you go down to the south of England and the actual maximum temperature average so far this summer is 25 degrees. That's an anomaly of 4 degrees. In other words, across the southern half of England, maximum temperatures on average up to the 17th of August have been 4 degrees above average. And around 1.5 degrees above the previous record, 1976. You'd need a temperature of less than, or you need a temperature of more than 6 degrees below average for the rest of summer for the south of England not to beat the record set in 1976. So really remarkable numbers coming through there for southern parts of the UK and how anomalous the maximum temperatures have been. I looked at a few sites in particular, and the average maximum temperature for London, for example, so far this summer has been 27 degrees. That's more than 4 degrees above average for London. That would be similar to an average summer somewhere much further south across Europe, somewhere like Nice or Lisbon. So extraordinary maximum temperatures, especially for the south of the UK. It has been a warm summer for Scotland, but it's also occasionally been a wet summer. Not the whole time. This shows the total rain, how it compares with average, and how it's accumulated through the season up to the 17th of August. And you can see the line up and down against the average, which is run through the middle. And actually, it's pretty much bang on average for the whole of Scotland. Some wetter periods, some drier periods. So at the moment, for Scotland as a whole, running at average, but that masks significant regional differences. Northern Scotland currently running at well above average by around 70 to 80 millimetres. Eastern Scotland running at well below average. So big regional differences. I'll have a map in a moment showing this. Big regional differences across Scotland. Northern Ireland only just dipped below average for summer so far. You can see that line. It's flat line for a bit after some wetter weather through April into May and into June. Actually, I'm talking about summer. What these graphs are showing is perhaps more useful than talking about summer. It's the period from the 1st of April up until the end of September. So it's this period in which you predominantly get a deficit in rainfall anyway. In other words, you get less rainfall, you get more evaporation, you get more transpiration by plants and so on. So this is the period of the year when you typically get a deficit in soil moisture and things like that. And it just shows you whether that's been on track or whether it's been more extreme compared with what you'd expect. So Northern Ireland currently running at a deficit in rainfall since the 1st of April. Nowhere near as much of a deficit compared with England and Wales. And you can see 1 or 2 wet periods since the 1st of April, an awful lot of dry periods. Just point out one wet period. Again, you might have forgotten this. Last few days of May into the first 10 days of June. And you can see how that line, which shows the accumulated rain since the 1st of April, it goes quite steep upwards. So quite significant rain as summer began. Since that time, 10th or 11th of June, it's basically a flat line across England and Wales, barely a drop of rain in many places. In fact, remarkably, 61 dry days at the last count for Wisley, I think. Wisley. If it's not, I'll write a correction in the comments. It's just off the top of my head. I think Wisley. Check the comments and see if I'm right. I'll post a correction if not. So basically flatlined since the 10th or 11th of June, and now we've got this disparity. And I make that around 150 millimetres of rain deficit since the 1st of April. About that much. And it does vary, obviously, from place to place. I've looked at a few individual counties. For example, Berkshire, it's closer to 190 millimetres deficit since the 1st of April. Other places, it's more like 100, 110, 120 millimetres. But as a rule of thumb, let's just call it 150 millimetres deficit in rainfall across England and Wales since the 1st of April. So a very dry spring followed by a very dry summer, with one or two wetter spells. It's a little bit too simplistic. I would suggest to just say, now we need 150 millimetres of rain to make up for the deficit. A couple of reasons for that. One is that obviously there's this big place-to-place variation. Western Scotland, again, this is April to July, this map shows how rain compares with what you'd expect for April to July, that 4-month period. It's been wet for Western and Northern Scotland, dry for Eastern Scotland, and very dry in some parts of the Midlands, Eastern England, Central Southern England, less than 30% of its rainfall in that 4-month period. You're probably not surprised to hear that. So big regional variation. And it's not just about the deficit of rain either. It's about what happens to the moisture when it's on the ground. So if it's sunnier and hotter than normal, then so much more evaporation takes place. You need even more rain than you'd normally need to replenish the dry ground. And it has certainly been a sunny and hot period. This shows, same period, April to July 2026, sunshine, how it compares with average for the same period. Virtually everywhere, away from the northwest of Scotland, average or significantly above average sunshine during that period. More sunshine, more evaporation, drier soils, and more heat, of course, as well. Large part of England and Wales, 2 degrees or more above average. And as I mentioned, this is maximum temperature. As I mentioned, some parts of the south through the summer, not from April to July, which the map shows, but through the summer have been 4 degrees or more above average for maximum temperatures. So yeah, we've had 150 millimetres less rain than you'd expect since April across much of England and Wales. More in some places, but that combined with the fact that it's been sunny and hot means that so much more of it has evaporated, leading to even more of a sorry state in terms of dry ground across a large part of England and Wales at least. So we need a lot of rain, in other words, to make up for this deficit. Big question is, will we get it? Another thing to bear in mind when we talk about the lack of rain since April is how wet it was from October to March last year. This shows the amount of rain and how it compared with the middle black line there, the average, through October to March, and you can see how it accumulated, and this big chunk of blue above the average line in the middle appeared by the end of it, which isn't far off 150 millimetres on top of what we'd normally expect. So we've swung from one extreme, of course, with rain day after rain day, and we're talking about 2 months of consecutive rain days, to another extreme where we've seen dry day after dry day, and now talking about 2 months of consecutive dry days, an excess of 100 to 150 millimetres of rain during the wetter part of autumn and winter, and then a deficit of a similar amount of rain during the hotter, drier part of the year. So we've gone from one extreme to the other. Question is, will we go back to this next extreme when autumn begins? Well, there are a couple of things to bear in mind, and the most important is that autumn and winter weather in the UK is highly variable from year to year, from place to place. A lot of random variability. Very much depends on the track of lows, the shape and the track of the jet stream and so on. Couple of things though, very warm seas at the moment. That would, you'd think, encourage a bit more evaporation, a bit more moisture in the air, a bit more energy. Another thing, El Nino, of course, which increases the chances, loads the dice towards wetter and windier weather in the autumn and early winter. Doesn't guarantee it at all. It's not like every time there's an El Nino we get that weather. It just increases the chances of it, loads the dice towards it. So, yeah, there's a point at which we could make up. If we had that rainfall that we had last autumn and into the winter, there's a point at which that deficit could be made up. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's certainly not going to happen this week. Because, yeah, although you might have heard there's some rain expected over the next few days, and I suspect a lot of you will enjoy going out and standing and feeling the rain again across many parts of England and Wales where it's been seriously lacking. It's not going to be the most useful rain. First of all, it's not going to be a huge amount, and secondly, it's mostly going to be quite showery, so highly variable amounts across the country. What's going on? Here's the UK at the time of recording. Quite a powerful jet stream crossing the country, not something we've seen for a while. Low pressure close to the northwest of Scotland. Weather fronts swinging south. And if we put on a summary of these various charts, we can see what happens and the general setup at the same time. First front to keep an eye on, this front, bringing a spell of rain into Northern Ireland, much of England and Wales overnight. So yeah, this is the first chance of some reasonably widespread rain for those areas that desperately need it. But it's not going to be much rain. It's mostly light to moderate. It moves through. It's drier then by Wednesday. At this point on Wednesday, we've got low pressure over the northern half of the UK and a lot of showers pushing into Western Scotland, Northern Ireland in particular. That's where the most frequent downpours will be, heavy with thunder and hail. They'll be rattling through one after the other. Plenty of rain in Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Showers elsewhere, but fewer and further between. Even across parts of England and Wales, there'll be showers moving through, some heavy downpours, but not a great deal. Sunshine in between, certainly feeling cooler on Wednesday afternoon compared with recent days. Now, skipping ahead to Thursday, and the good news if you're after rain, in the south is that there'll be some more substantial showers moving through on Thursday as low pressure tumbles southwards. Jet stream dips. That brings, again, cooler air, not just at the surface, but higher up. That causes more instability in the atmosphere, causes some of these heavy downpours, quite slow moving, to affect parts of northern England, North Wales at first in the day, and then the liveliest showers push south. Many places getting a downpour on Thursday. If you just want to stand out in the rain and try and remember what it feels like, Thursday, good chance of getting hit by a sharp shower. Now, all the while, very variable rain accumulations, and even more so as we go into Friday. Still some instability in the atmosphere. At this stage, we've got weather fronts moving through the south of the UK, quieter picture further north, high pressure trying to build in, but it's going to take some time. We've still got a dip in the jet stream over us, so we've still got this cooler air higher up in the sky, causing instability. Plenty of showers then, especially in the east and western coastal areas, and for the southwest, some slow-moving, lively downpours. Saturday, let's show the bigger picture of this, because I think it's quite interesting. We've got this dip in the jet stream. Look at that. You can just about make it out. So that indicates we've got an upper low where the jet stream is, out towards the southwest of the UK. At the same time, we've got surface high pressure moving in. So that's going to settle things down gradually this weekend from the north. But with that dip in the jet stream across the south, well, that's why we're going to see quite a few showers across the southwest, western parts of Wales. Elsewhere, plenty of fine weather. Into Sunday, many of those showers get killed off as the high builds in. Things turn drier and sunnier. Not that warm, though. We've got this legacy of cool air. And let me show you the temperatures and how they'll compare over the next few days. These are maximum temperatures, which have been so extraordinary this summer so far. Still well above average across the south on Tuesday, back to average on Wednesday, below average on Thursday, and into Friday we're talking about mid to high teens in the north, high teens, low 20s in the south. Similar on Friday, if not a little bit lower. You can see how that compares with average by this summary here. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Much of the UK below average by Thursday and Friday. Blues widespread. Very few days this summer have had below average daytime temperatures. So that's certainly going to be noticeable and perhaps welcome for many people. But the rain, although welcome, not going to immediately fix the situation overnight. You wouldn't expect it to, given the serious deficit we've built up over the last few days, 2 months. And this shows the amount of rainfall, the total amount of rainfall out to the next 5 days. Let's skip ahead to Saturday. The map turns bluer. All areas seeing at least some rain. Where are the wetter spots? Northern England, northwest England there. That's because of the very lively showers that we start off Thursday. Could cause some issues, actually. Yeah, it has been very dry this summer, but that doesn't mitigate against issues caused by some heavy rain in a short space of time. Thursday morning, Northern England, North Wales, that's where the brighter colours are there, 100 millimetres perhaps. But further south, some darker blues, indicating 50 millimetres or so over the next few days. They're very speckled in nature, so really variable rainfall totals, not the most useful form of rain during coming days. You'd expect, as we go deeper into, say, September and October, the rain will become increasingly, in terms of fronts, big bands of rain rather than showers. But at this time of year, a lot of the rain comes in showers, of course, so it's very hit and miss. Speaking of going into late August, September, October, autumn is approaching, and the big question is, are we going to see a more permanent change in fortunes? Because you might have spotted this weekend high pressure moving back in, and you might have seen newspaper headlines that talk about another heat wave on the way for the start of September. Well, let's just say the reports of a heat wave are overblown at the moment, and this high pressure isn't expected to last more than a few days. It's going to bring a lot of dry weather early next week, which is what this graphic shows. This shows the most likely weather patterns for the next couple of weeks, and it shows blues for the time being. Blues are where you have low pressure close to the UK. Reds and oranges are where you have higher pressure close to the UK. So we've got the blues next couple of days because, of course, we've got low pressure toppling across the country. Then Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, more of these reds, which indicates high pressure close to the UK. In terms of high pressure and where it's likely to be, it's going to be toppling southeastwards across the country early next week and ending up to the east of the UK, with low pressure slowly approaching from the west. But here's what has caught my eye. These darker blues starting to flirt with the bottom right corner of the map. Those darker blues are westerly dominated weather patterns. These lighter blues are where you've got low pressure bringing northwesterly winds, and a lot more of these blues in general starting to appear for the last few days of August. What does that look like? Well, if we skip forward to, for example, Monday, the 31st of August, last day of meteorological summer, most likely weather pattern has low pressure over Scotland, a westerly breeze for all areas, and below average temperatures. That's what that shows. With, this is what this shows, blues, above average rainfall, most likely. Second and third most likely weather patterns, again, low pressure close to the UK. In this one, it's to the northeast. In this one, it's directly over the UK. I'm starting to see more and more very unsettled weather patterns from the middle of next week for the last few days of August and for the start of September. That's what seems to be coming through. That's what's summarised when you look at these charts. These charts basically look at all the model output, hundreds of model runs, and suggest the most likely weather patterns. And this is the kind of flavour that is starting to come through. Last few days of August, start of September. We're not talking about showers, we're talking about low pressure, very close to the UK. We're talking about an increase in the breeze. We're talking about below average temperatures, perhaps. We're talking about active weather fronts moving through. And if you desperately need the rain, and we obviously need an awful lot of the wet stuff, then that would be welcome news. But of course, we're talking about the middle of next week onwards, so it's not in what we call the reliable time frame for weather forecasting just yet. I'll look at it a bit more in the 10-day trend tomorrow. There are promising signs there, not of another heat wave, which is what some of the headlines are suggesting, and not of that high pressure this weekend lasting for more than a few days, but of something turning up that is a lot more autumnal as, of course, we move from meteorological summer into meteorological autumn. It's going to take a lot of rain to make up for the current situation, But what we've got at the moment and what may occur next week will be a good start. We'll keep you updated right here in the Met Office, of course, and yeah, don't forget to follow us and subscribe and hit like and comment, all that jazz. And stay tuned for the 10-day trend tomorrow on our YouTube channel. Bye-bye.